motion reconferencing the Minister for Health, and I call on Deputy Reilly Kelleher to move the motion. Deputy Kelleher.
Thank you, Last Councillor. I move the motion of no confidence in the name of the Fianna Fáil deputies in Dáil Éireann. At the outset, may I say that I don't particularly like putting down motions of no confidence in ministers, and I've seen it over the years here where it can get very personalised and can sometimes deflect from the reality of what a motion of no confidence in this case is trying to achieve. Now, I don't expect theatrics or drama tomorrow night and deputies walking across the floor to support our motion of no confidence in Dr James Reilly. But at the same time, I think I would be failing in my duty as an opposition deputy not to highlight the failings of the Minister in his tenure as Minister for Health. Now, the Minister is no longer on the back of a truck in some rural town promising the people the sun, moon and stars. He is the Minister for Health and he has a responsibility. And his actions and deeds to date have indicated that I believe that the vast majority of the people in this House do not have confidence in the Minister to carry out his duties. Since the Minister was appointed in 2012, we've had dysfunction and chaos reigning in the Department of Health. We've had the HSE, effectively under his stewardship, being slowly dismantled and incapable of delivering the health service that the Irish people expect. Now, at the outset, as I said, I want to keep this to the points of principle and a fair debate in terms of what this motion of no confidence is about. And as I said, it's about highlighting the failings of the Minister for Health in addressing the very serious challenges that the health services are facing in the months and years ahead. Now, Minister Reilly came to power and said that he had a mandate to bring about reform. He had a mandate to change how we deliver the health services. Unfortunately, Minister, that mandate was sought under false pretences. It was sought by promises to people in Roscommon that the A&E would be remained open. There was promises to the people of Monaghan and the North East that a new hospital would be built before there be any downgrading of services in Navan and Drogheda and Dundalk and elsewhere. It was sought by promises to the people of Cork that there would be no move of orthopaedic services from St Mary's. It was sought by promises that you would cut consultants' hospital pay. It was sought by promises that you would bring about the abolition of the prescription charges. And they are just to name a few promises, Minister. And I'm quite sure, as time goes on, many more of your commitments that you made, as I said, on the back of trucks throughout the length and breadth of this country will come to light. But quite clearly what we are facing now is a chaos and crisis in the Department of Health and in the health services in general. Now, this time last year, you started running around the corridors of power telling everybody and anybody that would listen to you that if we were facing Armageddon and doomsday if you didn't get your way in the context of delivering a budget for the health services for 2012. You put fear in your colleagues, and at the end of the day, you didn't get support in Cabinet to bring forward a budget that would be sustainable. And what we had in December of 2011 for this year's budget was a dishonest budget at the very least, Minister. You cobbled together something, you brought about figures and statistics, savings that could be achievable, legislation that would bring about price referencing, generic substitution, charging private insurers for full cost in public beds, and also the reduction of agency costs. None of this has happened. And as far back as last March, you were warned by the then CEO of the HSE, Cathal McGee, that the budget that you delivered in terms of estimates was no longer sustainable. As far as back as March, you didn't listen, you didn't take note, and we now have a situation where only a couple of weeks ago, because of your incompetence and your inability to deliver a budget and manage a budget, you had people outside government buildings protesting because their personal assistance were being withdrawn. Home help hours were being withdrawn. Home care packages were being withdrawn. So that is the context as to why we've put down a motion of no confidence. And I said, I don't do it lightly, and our party thought about it long and hard. But we felt we would be failing in our duty in terms of highlighting your failings and the damage and the impact that your inability to manage the health services and the reform proposals that you proposed and the impact that is having on people throughout the country. Now, Minister, there's two other ministers in your department, Minister Roisin Shortall and Minister Kathleen Lynch. And obviously tomorrow or this evening they will come in and they will swear allegiance to yourself. They will promise that they have a working relationship with you. It is quite evident, Minister, that there is bedlam in the department, that there isn't a functioning working relationship between yourself and the Ministers of State. We're still not quite sure whether you actually delegated functions to the ministers and give them specific areas of responsibility. And if you look at a report in the Sunday Times by Sarah McInerney with regard to Reilly and Shortall's fractious working relationship revealed in a series of angry letters, it is quite amazing that this is actually happening in the Department of Health. At a time when you have promised that there would be reform and that there would be structures put in place that would streamline the health services. And one of the basic promises you made was the whole issue of primary care and the rollout of the same. And we have the Minister, who was meant to be responsible, saying quite clearly that she has no responsibility in this area, that you undermine her budgets, you take money from ring-fenced budgets without even informing the Minister that is actually responsible for delivery of primary care. Now, unless these letters are figments of somebody's imagination, this shows that at the heart of the decision-making process in the Department of Health, there is a complete breakdown of trust between Minister Reilly and Minister Roisin Shortall, and I dare say Minister Kathleen Lynch as well. Because as recently as a number of days ago, the Minister with responsibility for mental health, Kathleen Lynch, said that there was no reduction in her budgets. But quite clearly, you have already raided that ring-fence budget to fund the deficit that is now very evident in the broader health services. So what I'm saying tonight, Minister, is that, look, at the end of the day, you came in with great fanfare and great promise. You did say that you would, transform the health services. Unfortunately, to date, there's, as I said, been nothing but dysfunction and chaos reigning in the department itself, and that has percolated down to the HSE. Now, what I find very bizarre, Minister, is you were appointed, as I said, last March, 12 months. One of your first major announcements was that you were going to get rid of the prescription charges. You actually announced, one of your first press releases was that you were going to get rid of the 50% prescription charge. Sometime later, you wrote back on that decision. You then arrived down to the HSE headquarters, as I said previously, like White Earp at the OK Corral, or maybe Doc Holliday in this case, to sack the board, and appointed it with your own people and Department of Health officials, which is fine. And you said that you have no control of the HSE. But as recently as 2 weeks ago, when the health cuts came out, you said that they were not sanctioned by government, that they were a HSE decision, and that you were going to overrule them when the backbenchers got a little tetchy. But more importantly, when you saw yourself the misery and the angst that you were causing many people who are the most vulnerable in our society outside government buildings, the fact that you could even sanction or contemplate the sanction of the removal of personal assistance, of home care packages and home helps in the context of a budget of 14.3 billion, that you had to decide that they would be the first areas that you would cut in terms of trying to rein in a deficit that you should have reined in months ago when you were told by the former CEO of the HSE and by members on this side of the House. And every time you raised that, we were shouted down on a continual basis for scaremongering and trying to whip up fear and anger out there among the public. And we weren't, Minister. We were just following what was happening. And the sad reality is, last June, in the Public Accounts Committee, the former CEO put his hands up and effectively said that the budget and the figures that were presented to the Dáil were no longer achievable and it was utterly unsustainable. And even at that late stage, 5 months into the year, you still refused to act. Minister Howland was imploring with you to get your house in order. Minister Roisin Shortall was beginning to write letters of disquiet to you, highlighting the fact that she was even willing at the late stage to try and intervene in terms of generic drugs, price referencing, to bring about negotiations that would at least save some funding in the year of 2012. So quite clearly, Minister, you have put your head in the sand and you have pretended that while you're talking a great game of reform and delivering better health services, what is evident out there is that your decisions last week and the week before in terms of attacking the most vulnerable in our society was the most distasteful thing I have seen this government do so far. And that is the reason why we decided we would place a motion of no confidence in you. Not because of the other difficulties. I know that you may be distracted in other areas, but it is quite clearly the decisions you sanctioned. And then the famous U-turn, that wasn't a U-turn, but at the same time, the Minister or the Taoiseach said you were courageous for changing your mind. Well, quite clearly, Minister, it was either a U-turn or else you sanctioned those cuts yourself. So what I'd like to know is get a bit of clarity as to who exactly is in charge. Because last year,
Sorry, Deputy, please. Shh. Sorry.
last year,
Sorry, Deputy, please. Please, one person in possession, please.
at some stage in June, I asked the Minister at a committee meeting when we had the Minister and the CEO of the HSE and senior officials who was actually in charge of the budget. And the Minister, with great gusto, rolled up his sleeves and said, "I'm in charge, I am responsible, and I accept full responsibility for every decision that the HSE makes." And yet, a couple of days ago, we had senior HSE officials wheeled out to bring about the bad news. And clearly, Minister, what you are doing is you are removing yourself from positions of responsibility. You went hiding, you went AWOL for a number of days until you were eventually flushed out, and eventually you had to make the U-turn, and we saw what happened from that. It was a courageous, brave decision described by the Taoiseach. Well, I can say it was a lousy, mean decision you made in the first place in the context of attacking the most vulnerable people that we have in our society. So let us be very clear about the grand plans that the government has in terms of universal health insurance and free GP care and universal primary care. Minister, may I just say that if it's the people who have personal assistance and who need them for basic functioning, if it is home helps and people who depend on home care packages are the ones that have to fund your reform and fund your inability to run the health services, well, I think you should actually go tonight, Minister, because it's simply said a very distasteful exercise that we have a situation where we have the people protesting outside government buildings to try and force a U-turn in terms of your decisions that you made as Minister for Health. So while we'll have plenty of pledges of loyalty from ministers, we'll have plenty of pledges of loyalty from Labour backbenchers and Fine Gael backbenchers, may I just say, Minister, you don't even have confidence among your cabinet colleagues. Quite clearly, they won't even express it in public. We had situations where Minister Burton was asked on numerous occasions in radio interviews, had she full confidence in Minister Reilly? And she wouldn't answer the question.
Over 2 minutes left.
Thank you very much. She failed to answer the question, and she failed to give full confidence to you. Minister Jan O'Sullivan, Minister Roisin Shortall and others have also said publicly that they have concerns by being silent in terms of expressing confidence in you. So clearly, Minister, you came in with a lot of fanfare and a lot of promise. As I said, you traipsed this country promising the sun, moon and stars to people. But I said, you're no longer on the back of a truck now as an opposition deputy. Your actions and your deeds do have an impact on people's lives. And I'm saying to you quite clearly, Minister, that your inability to work with ministers, your inability to bring about a proper sustainable budget has had a huge impact on people's lives to date. And let us be quite clear. There's many people up there are thinking that the cuts have been reversed. They simply haven't been. We already had a round of stealth cuts prior to the September announcement. And this is having a huge impact for people on a daily basis. Now, with regard to primary care and the funding of same, Minister, I'd like a bit of clarity on this particular one, because ministers of state are saying that their budgets are not raided, but at the same time you have announced, without even discussing it with them, that mental health funding would be used to plug the gap in the deficit, and that primary care funding as well would be used to plug the deficit. And they both, and if you want to contradict Roisin Shortall, the minister, you better read this Sunday Times report and the letters
Yep.
and the letters that are on the Minister for Health's and the letters on the Minister for Health's desk. So while you are shouting, well, you'll have your time. You'll have your time as well. I'm quite sure, Deputy. You'll have your time, and you can pledge full loyalty to the inability of this minister to manage what is a very, very important service for the people of this country. Minister, what I'm saying is, you will be promised full support from them all, but behind your backs and behind the backs of those people behind you there, many people have lost complete faith in you.